So let's go. Okay, Sönke, we are online now. So hi to everyone. My name is Tanya and you're on the Prosteer channel. Please write in the chat whether the connection is good for you. So today we are talking about note-taking, and I have a fantastic guest, a professor of philosophy of education, the author of the book, How to Take Smart Notes, Sönke Ahrens.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Sönke, at the beginning of the year, we read your book with our community of teachers to understand how we could help our students with notes. I know that you had a similar need in the past, at least I guess. So now we have a few questions for you, and actually all our viewers
Thank you so much for having me.
On YouTube, actually you guys, you can type your questions in the chat. And we have 1 hour. And I propose that let's start. So just for people who don't know what Smart Notes is, could you mention like 3-4 main differences from the usual way of noting?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically a system I learned from Niklas Luhmann, a German sociologist. He managed to get extremely productive with this kind of note-taking. And it's a non-linear way of collecting standardized notes in one place permanently forever. The emphasis is on making connections and continuing ideas within this Zzettelkasten, as he calls it, and it's not project bound. It's a long-term way of combining notes in just one place. But I can go into more details. Can you hear me well?
Yeah. Just two rows that we have like doubling sound, but
right.
I hope that now everything would be okay. If it's okay, people just who are with us, just write in the chat. Do you hear us properly? I'm so sorry, Sönke. Okay, it should be okay. Okay, let's start from your experience. What exactly made you figure out how the Luhmann method works?
How I figured it out, that's a good question, because there was very little material out there. And there were a few texts by himself, written in German only. I had a group of colleagues and friends, and we read together books of Luhmann because we were interested in the theory. And of course, the topic of his Zzettelkasten came up once in a while, so we exchanged ideas. One of them actually developed an app, Zеттkelsten 3, which was the first software emulating the system digitally. And then a research project on his Zzettelkasten published the first findings. That was extremely helpful. And there is also a literature archive had an exhibition on these kinds of file systems with exhibitions from his original works, with a beautiful title, Machines of Imagination. So seeing that in an exhibit was helpful to understand and check back as well. But it's a lot of gathering information from different places because it's not well, there wasn't a description available at that time.
That's interesting. This exhibition, is it permanent or?
No, unfortunately not. There is a catalog. I think it's in German only. But of course, there are other similar systems from other authors as well. So Luhmann is not the only one. He's just the one I focused on because I was familiar with his work and because I felt it's the most sophisticated. But of course, using index cards as a collection for your own thoughts, it's not a genuine new idea and has been done by others as well. So it's also interesting just to compare different systems. But I think what's probably most important for someone who wants to use it and to emulate it, or like your audience want to teach note-taking, it's not that important to focus on the differences. It's more important to just understand the few basic principles of it. And that's what I focused on in the book, just to understand what a difference it makes to not start with categories and hierarchies, but to start with one place where you put everything and build up from there. And it's not a huge setup. It's just changing the way you take notes and connect them. And then over time, it will build up to something. And I think understanding just the core ideas of it, that's crucial. Everything else, it's detail, and people adjust it to their own needs anyway.
Actually, I really liked that in your book you put like not only these core ideas, but put like researches, like science background, why it should work better with our memory, with our learning. It was like, wow,
yeah.
that was really cool. But sorry. No, say.
I'm glad you picked on that, because for me it was a lucky coincidence, trying to understand the system on one hand and reading a lot about the newer research on learning on the other hand, and it just fell into place because Luhmann was a sociologist. He wasn't interested in psychology and learning theories, so on that side, you couldn't find much about the reasons it worked. And then you read something else, and it just fits perfectly because you now see in live example of how to learn better in writing. And I think at the same time, it's an example of how the system works, that you bring ideas from two very different disciplines together in one place. And sometimes there is a resonance and you see, oh, there is a connection between it. And the connection is obvious as in the moment you made the connection, but it wasn't obvious before. And nobody has made the connection before. So it's a lucky finding. And I think that's what the system is all about, increasing the chance of lucky findings, which then doesn't necessarily feel like hard work, more like a discovery. And that, yeah, is the fun part of it.
But actually, it seemed like a really hard work, really like it seemed that you like read like tons of researches just combined in the right place. But it was really exciting for me because I always try to find for any practice just science, like just science support. I mean, some research that give the results and tell us why it works.
Yeah, I think that's a difference actually, because when you start with an idea and trying to find science supporting it, it is actually hard work because you don't know where to find it. You don't have the keywords and questions ready in mind. Maybe there is no proper science and you first have to understand it. But when you just go around and noting down everything you find interesting, and then a connection happens, it happens in the notes you already have. So for me, it's a way to not work that hard and more rely on lucky chances and increase the opportunities. Yeah, because just taking a few notes a day isn't that hard work, but it looks like it sometimes in hindsight, maybe.
Actually, you told about hierarchy. So what's wrong with our usual way of noting? I mean, when we present information in some kind of model form by topic, divided by discipline. So what's wrong?
There is probably not the usual way of note-taking. I think many people have the same experience I had before I started taking notes in this way, and that is you take notes in all kinds of different ways. When you study for an exam, you write down in your own words everything what's given you as material for it, but then you kind of archive that, and then maybe have a project where you need to write something, so you collect a lot of stuff in one place for that project. And then you have all the notes that come to you during the day that maybe end up in a journal or on the back of an envelope or in random places. And then there are the notes you take when you read something, and that might be just comments in the margins. Just highlighting sentences is always, it's also a form of note-taking, but it means that in the end you have all kinds of different notes, and a lot of them get lost, and get lost either because you can't find them anymore or you put them away in a folder. I think few people go back and look through their old notes from university days or even school, because you might do that for nostalgic reasons, but rarely because you know exactly where something is that is helpful for you today. And so having more access to all the findings along the way is only possible if you have one designated space, not to store everything, but just to keep the records of everything you deem important enough to maybe come back to later. And I think it only works if you have it in just one place, and then allow notes to come into play with each other. And if you have it distributed in different forms, different medias, different journals, it doesn't work. So it's about the long-term view, and not wasting so many good ideas along the way because they get lost.
Actually, that's really great. I mean, before your method, like human method or Zеттelькастен, or you could name it in different ways. But before, for me, every book was like something separate. Like I read it, I have some conclusions, for example, and move. But now it's all about connection. So when for example, we are now reading Sapolsky, like about human behavior. And for example, if I met like self-control, I go to my notes and I understood that I have notes from Kahneman, for example, from self-control, and I have some notes from before, like the book before, and I have some kind of like much wider understanding what is self-control from different aspects, and that's really crazy how it could work. But actually, like for me, one of the most challenging principles for your book was actually taking such smart notes, like write only my thoughts.
Right.
What from your experience, what was your period of restructuring standard notes into notes where there are strictly only your thoughts? And maybe you have some advice for the beginners.
Well, I share your experience, and I'm glad you point that out, because I think it's probably the most crucial difference to how we learn as students to write notes, because we usually start with trying to give an account of what others think and the findings of others, which kind of makes sense to start from there. But the permanent notes in the Zеттellkasten are indeed always rephrased in our own words, and they become more and more independent from the frames given by what we read or the questions others tried to answer. Because the moment we start making connections within our own system, we have to frame it differently. We have to follow our own questions. So the system kind of nudges us to think more deeply about the reasons we wrote something down. So elaborating on our own questions more. And the moment we combine ideas from different sources, we cannot help but turn it into something of our own. That doesn't mean we come up with new facts. It means trying to be true to the facts, but thinking more thoroughly about what that means for something we have already written down. So it becomes automatically more something of our own. And I think the old ways of writing an excerpt, for example, for a text we read, very much stays in the framing of the author's ideas. And just collecting excerpts is a collection of ideas of others, questions of others. So for me, I always, as a student, had the opportunity to follow my own ideas. So I became obsessed with certain questions and wondered what others think of it. So in a way, it felt much more naturally than to switch to a system, which allowed me to put my own questions first. At the same time, I do know that part of learning is to question your own questions and to come up with better questions and not sticking with the ones. So I think it's equally important to spend some time on giving a true account of what others think, but then also make the switch to, okay, what does it mean for what I thought before? And the system certainly nudges us to do that.
Yes, that's so great. Just understand how I thought before. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Actually, in for example, in post-Soviet education, we have this flavor. I mean, to just repeat, just know, like just to know what is the correct answer. Right. And don't put like your interpretation I know that for example, in US system, they at least write a lot of essays. We don't have like such a huge practice, and that's why when you're adult, even it's quite hard. You usually you try to just copy everything in this sentence and put in your boxes because you definitely know that it is correct.
Right.
Yeah, you're really afraid to make a mistake and just to put the wrong thought. But that's really cool that it's okay. It's just some part of your of your growth, actually.
Yeah, I heard a similar complaint from people in Asia, where I spent a couple of years, that students are trained to be very good in giving correct answers, but have trouble to think more independently. But I don't think it's that the Western American influenced European system of emphasizing independent thinking per se is better. I think we're trying to find something which is the best of both worlds, and that is not just coming up with your own original ideas, which don't have much value if the ideas are not very good. It's not a value in itself. It's only a value if the idea is better than what you have already. And this is where I believe writing comes into play, because in my experience with students, they often start with very strong opinions and have no trouble in expressing their ideas and discussing them. But only when they start writing them down, and I see their essays in writing, I see the problems with the argument, and we can discuss the pros and cons and the misunderstandings. It often doesn't really work well in an oral discussion alone. It only becomes more serious when it's written down. So I think the ability of giving a true account of other people's opinions, of facts, in writing, combined with making the transition, the translation into what that means for your own ideas, that I imagine would be a combination of the best of both worlds. Because at the moment, it seems the problem is, at least in Europe, not so much with people too much parroting other or the ideas of authorities. It's that everyone believes their own opinion is worth discussing. It's often not.
Yeah, that's true. We have a lot of, I guess, even disciplines in science that there are correct answers, actually. And you could not just, I don't know, decide that 1 + 1 should be 3 because I like this idea.
Yeah.
So we should stay like on the shoulders of gigants. Guidance. Yeah.
So, it's less the authority of people, it's the authority of facts and the authority of the things we deal with that we should adhere to or listen to more, maybe. Yeah,
that's right. Okay, so you talked about your students. So, and actually in your book, you write that, I guess it at the beginning of your book about that you should not start writing from scratch, actually, and this is some kind of a discovery too. So to what extent have you been able to help your students to rebuild their note-taking and maybe finish on time their theses or like some papers?
Yeah, that's a question I feared a little bit. I have no evaluation of the success rate, so I can't give you any proper data.
Okay.
But my feeling is I have a very low success rate when it comes to unsolicited advice, especially with younger students. So bachelor students often don't see the need for a more sophisticated system because from school they learned, well, writing everything down in a folder or a journal that is relevant for one course or one seminar or one lecture. And then they put it away until the exams, go through it, and then archive that for the semester. And that works for a certain degree, but they get into trouble when they start writing the bachelor thesis, or at least their master thesis, and have to come up with their own ideas. So it's much easier to explain students with more experience, so master students, PhD students, why it makes sense to spend a little bit time thinking about the note-taking system. But with bachelor students, I often feel they think it's completely over the top. They don't really see the need for it. At least most of my students don't. But it's also weird for me because in my university, I'm not known for note-taking. So my authority lies in philosophy of education and epistemology. So when I start talking about note-taking, it feels, I think, for students and colleagues more, that's my pet side project. It's not to be taken too seriously. And it's strange because outside the university, people who have read the book don't know about my usual line of work. It's no one is really interested in the philosophy of education side, and there people are very eager to learn about note-taking and how it works. So I made the decision, I'm not imposing it on people who are not asking for it. Because it makes more sense to spend a little bit more time with those who already see the need for proper note-taking. But I know for your audience, which is concerned about teaching note-taking and teaching proper learning, I don't have much valuable advice in that regard. I think when all colleagues would put more emphasis on the practical side of studying, that would help a lot, especially students with a non-academic background. My parents weren't at university, so I felt nobody is explaining to me the practical side of it. Everyone seemed to know how to do it. And I also have some students who feel a bit left alone and not helped enough how to do practical things. Just what is a seminar, what is a lecture, what am I supposed to do here? What are important things to write down? And So I think it would be great if universities, higher education would offer more practical guidance on how to conduct research, and not just methodology, but really something down to earth like note-taking.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we have like the same situation that people really like they become student, but don't really understand what is to be a student, like how to learn, how to like noting something, how to read actually like non-fiction books, and how to prepare questions, and etc. I guess it would be really great to have some like pre-course before.
But maybe it's also that at least my pet theory, that there is a common misunderstanding about thinking and writing that makes note-taking an afterthought. I think the most prevalent idea about what thinking is that it's happening in our brain, and only afterwards we write it down. And if we think about note-taking as literally an afterthought, of course it doesn't get much attention. We put much more attention on mental models, on metacognitive strategies, but not very much attention to something like writing, organizing stuff outside of the brain. But if we take research about the extended mind, the importance of our surroundings seriously, it means the quality of our thinking depends a lot on how we organize this stuff around us, because that's where the thinking happens as well. And so that's my pet theory about why it's not taken as seriously as it should be. Maybe there is an epistemological misunderstanding. The same is for learning. If we think about learning as not losing information, we of course look for strategies to ingrain it more deeply into our brains. But if we take the research seriously that it's circumventing the inhibition mechanism, that is great, so we don't get overwhelmed with memories, then it's all about making connections between pieces of information. And if remembering is following the lines of these connections back to our memories, we would put much more emphasis on making these connections. And that is what the system can help us with, because it prompts us with the question, okay, this piece of information, how is it related to other pieces of information? And not just abstractly, but literally, which node is this node connected to, and where can we find it? So it's a very practical way of making a connection and writing the connection down. And that's a different model of learning. And writing stuff down and trying to repeat it until we know it by heart, that would make sense if learning is ingraining information in our brains, but it's not. So my belief is that we carry around these everyday theories on how learning works, how the relationship is between thinking and writing, that makes us look for certain strategies. And my hope is that with a change in understanding, there's also a change in where we put the emphasis on what we teach. And note-taking hopefully will get more attention, because it moves more to the center of what is deemed important.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I guess like the more we know about our brain, and we now know a lot, and actually I really hope that after some time we will move to understanding that these connections are important, and we should like change our methodology, how to learn and how to teach other people. So, okay, let's talk about instruments.
Right.
How do you exactly like practice taking notes? I mean, how much do you do a day? What programs do you use? Do you have like some kind of habit? I don't know.
Right. So I tried different things out. I started with pen and paper. I started with A5, so a little bit too large, and it felt weird because I felt like I don't have enough ideas to fill the page. So I moved to a smaller like index card, DIN A6, and that's what Luhmann used. And that felt much better because suddenly the idea fit onto the page. But the problem with paper is you can't do a full text search. You have to carry around with you. I moved quite a bit. So I looked for digital solutions. And the first one I found is from the colleague I was in a reading group with, from Hamburg as well. And I liked that, but it was a one-man project. He wrote it in his spare time. I think he did a great job, but the technology moved on. And only recently, so in the last few years, a new generation of apps were developed, which uses bidirectional linking, so that if you link to another node, it automatically links back from that. And there is a whole range, and I'm not an expert on everything that's going on in the software space, because I'm more interested in actually reading and thinking and writing, and not becoming a software guy, which I'm not. But I feel there are two front runners at the moment, and that's Obsidian and Rome Research. And I'm using Rome Research, and I like it a lot. I probably would start with Obsidian now, because it's storing the information on your personal computer and not in the cloud. It's has a lively community around it, people who write add-ons for it. Similar with Rome Research, a very lively community. But in the end, I think if it's working well for you and has a low threshold and it's not complicated, it doesn't focus too much on fancy details, both should work fine. And I believe there are a lot more alternatives now, Settler or Logsec. But I would look up what's going on in that space. What I wouldn't do is look for a software that is hierarchical organized, and which is topic organized, or just works with tags and built for something else. Something like Evernote or Notion. I think that makes it difficult over time to really develop a non-linear circular Zеттelькастен. So it makes sense to spend a little bit time comparing software. But I'm really happy with Rome Research in combination with Zotero. So all the sources, the literature is stored in Zotero, and Rome Research is really reserved for my own ideas. And that works well for me.
I used Obsidian, so I actually like it very much, and the reason was actually that I could use it offline. I mean,
yeah,
on my laptop, and with especially now with our situation in Ukraine, it's somehow better. But that I definitely know that the Obsidian has like steeper learning curve. It's harder to understand what's going on than in our own research, as like from my experience and maybe experience of other people.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get into it?
Not so long, but how would say a program, so it looks like similar. So I like this like interface, but I know that people who are not like technical people, so that could be really not so easy. But you get a lot of support from the community, and the community is awesome, just awesome. I mean that just maybe some people would listen us and try if you try Obsidian and it seems that it's very hard. It's not so hard. It could be like from the first day, but after would be easier. Give yourself a weekend. Would you think that that's I guess pretty good. Anyway, for example, in Obsidian we have even the Ukrainian language, so it's I guess it's not a problem at all. Yeah, and I think everything else comes over time. So setting it up, wrapping your head around how linking works, that's maybe done in a weekend, but then over time, getting a feeling for how to make good connections, how many links make sense, how long should the notes be, what do you write down, what not, that really develops over time. So I would say the learning curve is somewhere between a weekend and a lifetime, because you never stop learning, improving, working with the system. I certainly still do. I constantly make adjustments, but you don't have to start over. You can make all the adjustments along the way, and I think that's what's nice. It's not this what you sometimes have with setting up a new computer or other apps, that you start all over when you decide to use something else. You can just do it along the way. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So just it should not be like the perfect, just practice and learn like simultaneously. Yeah, it's never perfect. It's so imperfect because it's always about correcting old ideas and finding new research that contradicts old ones. Okay, I would like to talk about your book actually. So your book had like a huge resonance actually in the world. A lot of communities created like after this book. I mean, in even messengers like Telegram, maybe like more than 4,000 or 5,000 people just combined and try to have like smart notes. So how do you think? Why? Does it mean that our society, like we are hungry for a new way of thinking? Well, it started with when I
thought about the system and got excited about it, it was like, why is nobody talking about that? Why is note-taking, and especially this system, not something everyone is talking about? So that's the start. And then people actually started reading, commenting, recommending it. So it went to, people are actually interested. Why are so many people interested in that? And now it kind of comes back to, yeah, obviously it makes sense. We changed our understanding on how learning works. We changed our understanding on the importance of our surroundings for our thinking. We became much more used to non-linear ways of writing through the internet. So in a way, it feels very natural that we now look for ways of developing our own ideas in a non-linear way, and that there is a need for an offer of a solution. So in a way, it's not surprising that there is a need for that. I'm very curious how it plays out, because I believe that a lot of the institutions of higher education are at odds with a system that is very much emphasizing following your own ideas and your own path. And my hope is that it influences a little bit how we make connections between disciplines and allowing students to actually follow their own ideas. But yeah, I'm very pleased that there is now a lively discussion on something that might look on first sight a little bit boring, like note-taking and nerdy. But I think many people grasp that it's not just a way of organizing, it's almost a way of living, because having a designated space to go to and spend time thinking about what you read and doing something with it. It's I like the idea of many people discovering a way of putting that into practice, and not just thinking a little bit about the books they read, but then doing something with it, having a place, a software, writing their ideas down, developing them, and exchanging ideas with others about how to improve that. I think that's wonderful.
Yes, that's true. People say that visualization of a graph in Obsidian is really great. Actually, like I guess in Rome research, it's the same story, that you could see the graph of your
I think the Obsidian visualization is much nicer, and it brings a playful thing into it, and I like that.
Yeah, that's true. And like I would like to ask you about the size. Actually, I know that a lot of people, they start to write notes, for example, daily notes, daily thoughts, and after some time they realize that they had like a huge system, like more than 1,000 notes, and it's some kind of mess. So maybe you could suggest something from the start, how like not to have ugly system of notes.
Yeah, I think that's part of the learning that comes along the way, that you adjust the system, you realize, okay, you maybe took too many notes, so you cut back on that, then you feel you haven't written enough, and then you write a little bit more. I think that's natural, and you have to find your way. But I like the metaphor of critical mass. I think the Zеттellkasten should be considered as a critical mass of very good ideas. First of all, it takes time to write something down. So just from economical, it makes economical sense to only write down a few selected important ideas and not everything that comes along the way. Secondly, spending time writing it in your own words also takes a bit of time, because you have to think about it, and you also have to think about how it connects. So there's another piece where it makes sense to be selective. And if you have a lot of notes that are not thoroughly thought through, that are a little bit random, then you don't build the critical mass. It just stays a collection. But you need enough to get the reaction, the chain reaction going. And good, well thought through ideas written in full sentences, so you still are able to understand them years later, they can build up this critical mass and trigger a chain reaction of new ideas. So that's the metaphor I have in mind, to be very selective. And I don't write that many notes, so maybe on average a couple, 3 a day, because there are days I don't write permanent notes. I just focus on reading, writing maybe literature notes. Sometimes I'm preoccupied with going through a manuscript or preparing a lecture, and there aren't that many good ideas worth writing down. But then there are phases where I'm very immersed in writing permanent notes, and then I write quite a few. And just the practice of adding and looking for connection usually now triggers more ideas. So I think it changed from just collecting stuff, putting it into the system, to now having most notes written in response to what I've written before. So I think that changes over time. Yeah.
That's really great. Yeah. And I thought that you mentioned that we should understand your note, like our note, after some time. I know that there is, at least for Obsidian plugin, like to read random note like per day, one per day, and I guess it's quite nice habit. Just especially if you have like huge system already.
Yeah.
Okay. So my last question for you about your new version. So what we should do with our teachers, buy the new one and read again? What is the difference between second version and the first one?
Yeah, so one reason to have a new edition of the book is there were mistakes in the first one. It was written as a side project, self-published. It looked self-published, and people pointed out typos, spelling mistakes, and a couple of factual mistakes as well. So I needed to improve on that. People were extremely kind, and I appreciate this feedback loop we have nowadays. it wasn't like that in the old days, I think, that people just write you an email pointing out something and you can correct it on the go. But the second is people wanted a visualization of Luhmann's notes. So I added an appendix, and so you now have a little bit of a visualization and an example of the notes Luhmann wrote on his note-taking. So it kind of makes sense to pick up on that. And what is interesting about these notes is when you look at the finished published text, where he wrote about his experience on working with his system, it's very close to the notes he's written within the system. So that shows how much effort he put into writing notes. It's not just random ideas, it's very close to the finished manuscript. So he's halfway there to the published text when you look at it. And then, of course, it's a lot about how to put them in order. You just don't have a collection of notes in the final text. It needs to be turned into a continuous text. But you see how he came from notes to the manuscript. And for me, it was a reminder to take them seriously. Yeah, so the main difference is less mistakes and an appendix added to it. And I also like the cover by a couple of nice graphic designers who I very much like. I like their work, and I think they've done a good job on that as well.
Actually, as I remember, you wrote the first edition exactly via this like methodology. Yeah.
I think there was another book published in German, but I'm not sure who published it first. But in English, it's certainly the first one, and now being translated in quite a few more languages.
Yeah, I mean, you used Zеттellkasten just to create this book, so it's just the result of this methodology, your practice, and that's great that you show that, okay, guys, this book I created via this method, so it works.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was really great. I really want to have your book in Ukrainian, really. Try to push but I hope that like few months and they will recover from just a little bit from the war, so maybe we will come back to this question, because I guess every student should read it, really. Really
and would be extremely happy to see it translated into Ukrainian. And if there's any possibility to use it as a kind of support for the country, I'm very happy to work with any publisher on that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. You for me is now like a superhero. Like actually, it's really similar to be like a Spider-Man. So the world know you as the best note taker, and your like close people know you in the different like as usual. I mean, usual person or professor just for philosophy or education.
It's like the positive version of shooting the messenger. I feel like I told about Luhmann's system and his productivity, but it's very nice to be connected with that. And it's nice to be the messenger of the system. And I'm really glad that it it resonates with people. And one of the nicest benefits for me personally is to get into contact with extremely nice people from around the world. And I very much enjoy talking to you and seeing that it resonates with you as well.
Yeah, that's really great. Okay, let's see after this stream how it will go with note taking for people.
Sure. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. Yeah, it was really great. So